The moment that the world never imagined would arrive has finally arrived, following months of shifting portraits, palace rumors, and public conjecture. At last, Princess Catherine has spoken up. The monarchy and the country were in shocked astonishment as her steady yet sorrowful voice echoed throughout the royal grounds. Not only was what she said devastating, but it also revealed anxieties that the palace was making a valiant effort to conceal. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates before we delve further into what this actually implies for the royal family. The doors were supposed to remain shut. There were only a few people in the soundproofed, press-sealed room: senior courtiers, trusted aides, and a few family members. The events that transpired beyond the gilded walls, however, would reverberate well beyond Buckingham Palace. Princess Catherine appeared before them, calm but clearly tense, and started reading from a statement that had been handwritten. Tension permeated the air. Her well-chosen words revealed as much as they informed. She spoke as a mother, as well as the Princess of Wales, and everyone was shocked by what she disclosed regarding Prince Louis's condition. Even the most experienced royal correspondents were stunned by the phrase "condition," which was used cautiously and neither explained nor refuted. She spoke in a forceful yet delicate tone while describing a tragic reality, unseen difficulties, and concealed suffering. A spooky silence descended among the halls, according to palace aides. Hours later, an insider whispered to a journalist, "We always knew she'd do what was right." However, none of us were prepared for the expense. Nevertheless, the aim behind Catherine's message was more startling than its content. Her last words echoed over tradition like a bell. The truth needs to be revealed. A modest yet defiant word that signals a major violation of royal protocol. She hadn't asked for permission. The palace press office had not given her the all-clear. She had just decided to talk. By doing this, she not only put herself in the middle of a worldwide tempest, but she also put herself at odds with the same organization that she had previously promised to support. However, we need to go back to the initial subtle indications in order to comprehend why Catherine's declaration rocked the monarchy to its core. Long before anyone realized it, Prince Louis's world was shifting. Daring to acknowledge it, the world was alerted by the deafening quiet rather than a shout. One question kept coming up as the royal festivities, public appearances, and official photographs went on. "Prince Louis, where are you?" His absence from significant events sparked rumors in the media, but what began as tabloid chit-chat soon turned into something much darker. It seemed subtle at first, a trimmed snapshot here, a missed engagement there. The public became aware of an odd edit at a royal Easter ceremony. Although Louis's name appeared on the official schedule, he was not present. Speculation was dismissed as internet chatter, but astute royal observers started to assemble a list. A pattern emerged from balcony appearances to Christmas carols. The silence around him was growing deafening, and Louis was nowhere to be seen. Then the picture appeared. What ought to have been a happy, cohesive picture of the Wales family commemorating Prince George's birthday turned to become a contentious hotspot. With the exception of one obvious detail, the image was warm, polished, and everything the monarchy wished to convey. There was no Prince Louis. Not forgotten. Taken out. Social media was ablaze with rumors dubbed Portraitgate. Digital forensic specialists joined in, raising concerns about shadows, spacing, and posture, because they were certain the picture had been manipulated. And why, if at all? In an effort to put out the fire, the palace released an ambiguous statement within hours. At home, Prince Louis is having more peace and quiet. But the phrasing only added fuel. It said, "What sort of silence pushes a child away from the picture of his own family? What's more, why now?" The press wasn't persuaded, the public wasn't happy, and tension started to build up inside the palace behind the scenes. It was the contradictions, not simply the absence. According to calendar entries from leaked royal schedules, Louis was initially scheduled to attend a number of events before the items were discreetly removed in later iterations. Family close aides started to voice their worries. According to some, Catherine had grown more reclusive. Others rumored that she had visited a private medical center on several occasions by herself, while maintaining strict confidentiality. The period coincided with Louis's absence dates. Even the tabloids had ceased to consider the matter as frivolous rumors by this time. Credible sources started to go further. Reporters who had long had access to the palace were shut out. The length of briefings was reduced. Overnight, royal communications were strengthened. However, it was evident that something was falling apart beyond those gilded gates, even as the royal apparatus worked to quell the mounting anxiety. The fact that Catherine was seen alone at the rear entrance of a high-security pediatric facility was the last straw for many. The head was bent. Unmarked security trucks encircled her automobile. There was no response from the palace, but the press didn't require one. No amount of denial could ever match the visual quiet. The public and press didn't figure out the secret as the questions grew and the stillness deepened. Rather, an unintentional disclosure broke the illusion entirely. It was never intended for public view. However, the reality they had battled to conceal was revealed by a single misplaced paper and a mistake in the highly secured palace communication chain. There was only one name inside. Identifying the youngest prince and providing a diagnosis. Damage control had to go into overdrive as a result of the leak, which left royal employees running. The press did not intercept the file. It wasn't from an agenda-driven whistleblower. It was the consequence of a clerical error and an internal health letter marked as extremely secret that wound up in the inbox of someone it shouldn't have reached, as palace insiders would later acknowledge. That someone, who wishes to remain anonymous, thought it was a benign administrative memo and sent it to a third party. It had already found its way into the hands of someone who would not keep quiet by the time its actual contents were revealed. The continuous pediatric observation and response process that is directly related to Prince Louis was mentioned in the text. The medical, technical terminology was apparent. The page was replete with terms like neurodevelopmental divergence, longitudinal monitoring, and progressive markers. Non-disclosure continuation and controlled story technique were discussed in the last paragraph, words that aren't usually connected to the welfare of children. This was more than a health report. This was a scheme, and the public was never supposed to know about it. Panic broke out in the palace when the leak reached the private circuits of the London press network. All night long, phones rang. Before the first headline could be written, legal threats were prepared. However, the harm was already done. The document didn't need to be published by the few journalists who had seen it. All they had to do was hint at what it showed. The rest was done by the general public. There was an explosion of speculation. What started out as worry turned into pure terror. The palace responded right away. All conversations pertaining to health were blocked. Employees received warnings, reprimands, and reorganizations. Even long-term assistants had limited physical access to internal files, and a new set of digital security measures was hurriedly implemented. The meeting, an emergency crisis summit, called by King Charles himself, then took place. It was anticipated that every senior member of the royal household would be present. However, one chair was still unoccupied, Catherine's. Her absence was feared rather than questioned. Was it an unspoken protest, an unwillingness to assist, or was it something more profound, something that was already happening behind closed doors? According to several palace insiders, Catherine had been becoming agitated by the concealment. Some claimed she had been aware of the paper for weeks and had taken no action to stop it from spreading. Like a lot of things inside the royal gates, the truth was shrouded in uncertainty. However, the breach revealed this to the world. Prince Louis wasn't just sick. He was the focus of top-down narrative management, well-planned quiet, and meticulously orchestrated press appearances. Who in the palace still had the courage to speak the truth was the real question, not merely his connection state. If this leak was accidental, however, the subsequent actions were intentional and originated from the palace's core. Voices were raised, according to witnesses. Some claim that Princess Anne sobbed as she exited the room. The most devoted royal undoubtedly made an impassioned outburst against her brother, the king, behind closed doors over what she described as a violation of transparency. Prince Louis and the public concealment of the truth were at the core of her rage. The altercation was not planned. Royal etiquette did not soften or rehearse it. It was explosive, quick, and raw. Palisades claims that it took place a few hours after the royal corridors were rocked by the leaked medical file. Long regarded as the monarchy's most steadfast defender, Princess Anne unexpectedly barged into a high-strategy meeting. She wasn't protecting the throne this time, though. For her nephew, she was calling for justice. She didn't hold back when she stood in front of Charles. She said he was planning a deliberate silence. I heard Catherine yell, "You've silenced me. And you've let Louis down by doing this. We've all been let down by you." The room's staff was in disbelief. In real time, Anne's normally unwavering poise broke down. She demanded to know who had approved the cover-up and slapped a folder with her own copies of the leaked material onto the table. Cornered and blindsided, Charles attempted to recover control. He apparently gave a chilly dismissive in response. "Anne, you don't have to tell everyone. Not by them. Not by the entire planet." His remarks, which were meant to be soothing, instead made the situation worse. One top aide claimed that Anne's voice shook as she retaliated. What happens when your followers lose faith in you? If quiet is the foundation of your throne, what remains of it? There was said to be a startled hush in the room. Advisors looked at one another, unsure whether to step in or step aside. The situation had veered from formality into a very intimate one. The conflict was familial, rather than political. This sister was looking down on a brother who, in her opinion, had lost his moral sense. And Anne wasn't behaving like a queen in that chamber. She pretended to be a woman who had had enough. Anne abruptly exited the gathering without saying anything more. However, the aftermath was all over the palace. She was seen leaving a private hallway with her face smeared with tears. Some claim that she went straight to Catherine's room. It has never been verified what was stated behind those doors. However, Anne was clearly upset when she came out. The rage has vanished. All that was left was silent determination. The royal circle quickly became aware of the situation. Always discreet and faithful, Anne had taken sides. And the truth was the side she selected. She encouraged Catherine to talk, according to several later sources. She allegedly muttered, "Do what you must, or they'll never let you say it at all." Nobody was aware that Catherine was already getting anything ready. Something very intimate, something definitive, something irrevocable. A handwritten note that William was never supposed to read was found by aides in a private drawer under layers of family photos. Catherine's words, written with tears and self-control, showed her suffering as much as her determination. There was no more silence. And this letter served as both a warning and a confession. The letter lacked a royal seal and formal marks. Just the distinctive handwriting of Catherine on cream-colored paper that was nicely folded and appeared to be waiting. It was discovered by chance, while the couple's Kensington private quarters were being rearranged. Seldom was the drawer opened. Its contents are sensitive and personal. Until the first paragraph was read, aides thought it was a forgotten note. "If you've found this, then I never had the strength to say it aloud." A tidal surge of love, guilt, and anguish swept through the words that followed. The full extent of Louis's illness, the length of time she had known him, the intensity of her battle behind closed doors, and the complete sense of loneliness she had experienced were all revealed by Catherine as she poured herself onto the paper. She talked about spending time by his bedside alone, getting second opinions, and having experts come in under false pretenses. She wrote about being instructed to smile for the cameras as she saw her son fade in slow motion. She didn't hold William responsible. She really commended him, referring to him as the cornerstone upon which we all rest. However, she also revealed his breaking point. Her letter claimed that William had been deteriorating within the palace gates while attempting to keep his royal dignity in public. She described how he would sit in Louis's room long after the boy had gone to sleep, just to be close to him, and how his hands would shake and how his nights were restless. But even William, with all his might, had yielded to the machine of the monarchy. The letter wasn't intended to cause a stir, according to aides who read it. It wasn't a call for assistance, it was a legacy act. Everyone's heart was broken by one line in particular: he's fading away. They also want me to be happy. It encapsulated the intolerable strain Catherine had experienced and the unrealistic assumption that she would maintain her composure as her world fell apart. William received the letter a few days prior to Catherine's public declaration. When he read it by himself, he was at Sandringham, sitting in the same estate where he had played as a carefree youngster. He remained motionless for hours, according to sources. He remained silent. Food brought by staff was left unopened. His countenance was hollow, and his face was colorless when he eventually came out. There was only understanding, no conflict, no disputes. Something changed between them at that very moment. William gave up opposing the palace's strategy. His resistance to Catherine's intuition ceased. He moved aside to give her a chance to speak, because the letter had been more than just an admission of suffering. It had been a last appeal for the truth. Nevertheless, the royal image had to be maintained until an unexpected person made an action that broke with royal custom. Nobody anticipated it. Prince Harry, a contentious and aloof figure, beat all odds and made the call that shocked the monarchy after years of exile, scandal, and quiet. His message was straightforward. I understand what it's like to be kept in the dark. Inform them. The crown shook, alliances changed, and lines became hazy in that instant. A news notice was the first step. Thousands of miles away, Prince Harry witnessed the media frenzy surrounding Louis unfold in real time. It was all too familiar. The rumors, the headlines, the sudden curiosity in Catherine's whereabouts. His sister-in-law and her child were now directly targeted by the same equipment that had previously turned against him and Meghan. It wasn't simply the publicity, though, that shocked him. It was the quiet. The same quiet he had resisted before. The same quiet that almost killed him. He didn't follow the proper procedures. He kept royal aides in the dark. He took up the phone and made a direct call to Catherine. It was such an unexpected moment. Even Catherine was hesitant to respond. When she did, however, the words came fast. Harry spoke as someone who had experienced the suffering she now carried, not as a prince or a rebel. He assured her that he comprehended, that he understood what it was like to be excluded. Silence was a sign of loyalty, according to Gaslit, because survival was loyalty. One of the most jealously guarded events in royal memory would be what transpired next. Harry and Catherine conversed uninterrupted for 37 minutes, no assistance, no recordings. Just two voices, differing in shape, but the same in intensity, reuniting over a common loss. Catherine paid attention. She refrained from interjecting. She also stated, "They'll never understand if you don't," in response to Harry's statement, "You have to tell them." Something changed within her, but the chat didn't sit well back in Montecito. The call was perceived as a betrayal of bounds by Meghan, who was already at war with the royal family. Reports of a heated argument between the couple, in which Meghan reminded Harry of their initial reasons for leaving, were released by insiders. For Harry, however, this was not about making amends. It had to do with ending a cycle. He also noticed a sadness in Louis's tale that, in unexpected ways, reflected his own. Harry's words were the prod I needed, as Catherine would later say. A statement that demonstrated how nearly she had retreated once more. How strong the pressure from the palace had been. She was no longer alone, though. She had been dragged forward by someone outside. He knew the price of silence, not because he desired retribution. There were more repercussions from the call. William answered the phone for the first time in months. Just two brothers, shattered by history and toughened by time, speaking once more without any helpers or middlemen. Not everything was resolved by the conversation. However, it unlocked a door that had been slammed shut for a long time. With resistance growing inside the palace and friends emerging from unlikely places, the monarch himself would make the next move rather than Catherine. King Charles made a last-ditch effort to stop everything just hours before Catherine's statement was scheduled to be made public. His order was unheard of and, some claim, unconstitutional. The reality was only one aspect of the monarch's terror. It had to do with how that reality would affect the crown's future. The order was given covertly. Several branches of the royal administration received an encrypted directive at 2:43 a.m. from the king's confidential legal team. Alarms were aroused only by its title. Category read Immediate Containment Protocol. Its sole goal was to stop Princess Catherine from making her scheduled public speech. The rationale? An allegation that she was operating against the institution's best interests and was emotionally ill. The palace aimed to undermine her voice and her status as a senior royal and mother in one broad stroke. The legal team hurried behind the scenes to establish that Catherine's statement constituted a serious threat to the monarchy's reputation. They proposed using a little-known provision that had been inactive for almost 70 years and gave the sovereign the authority to censor internal communications that were thought to be a threat to the institution's stability. Even the most devoted advisors, however, were hesitant. It wasn't policy. This was repression. It was also taking place in real time. William then came under pressure. Charles's advisors advised him to act as a future king and step in when he was called for an emergency briefing. It was a direct plea. Before the harm is irreparable, stop Catherine. However, William declined, already upset by Harry's call and Catherine's letter. One terrifying statement is reported to have been his response. The monarchy deserves to fall, if this does. A disillusioned and enraged palace staffer took an unexpected move as tensions reached a breaking point. They gave a senior journalist with a reputation for honesty and reached the King's Gag Order effort. The tale went viral in a matter of hours. Headlines like, "Monarchy moves to mute the princess," and "Catherine silenced by her own palace" were on front pages. Anger erupted on social media. In less than 20 minutes, the hashtag #LetCatherine became a global craze. Former royals, celebrities, activists, and even dignitaries from other countries joined the chorus. Stunned by the magnitude of the outcry, the palace struggled to come up with a response. Statements were withheld completely, changed, and then postponed. All calls were cut off by the royal press office. Events were rescheduled because two aides canceled appearances. Charles disappeared amid the mayhem, apparently withdrawing to Balmoral. Sitting introspection. Insiders, however, knew the cause. The monarch had lost a crucial hold on his own family as well as authority over the story. It could no longer be contained. The dam had exploded. Catherine stood silently in the middle of the storm, without flinching from the demands of the world, which wasn't only watching. She saw, with a mother's clarity, that silence was no longer an option, since the system that had once informed her that it was her job to be silent had now shown that it was afraid of her voice. Catherine was on the brink of history, prepared to speak not only for her son, but also for every mother the institution had ever let down, as the monarchy was in disarray and the public demanded the truth. The screen fades in. No pomp, no guards. Just the sound of a country holding its breath, a mother and a princess. Catherine exposes the most agonizing truth of her royal life in a voice that is shaky but firm, and the meticulously built barriers of concealment start to come down with each word. She was not protected from the rawness of the situation by a palace backdrop, a formal attire, or any royal insignia. The Princess of Wales wasn't making a planned statement here. Speaking as the mother of a child who had been concealed, shielded, and hushed for far too long, this was Catherine, stripped of title and formality. She started off gently and simply, but every word felt like thunder because of the seriousness in her voice. She validated what millions had assumed and feared. It had been determined that Prince Louis had a rare neurological condition. It had subtly changed every aspect of their life. Instead of using clinical terminology, Catherine used human phrases to explain the missed milestones and restless nights, the prayers in silence. She talked about the slow, painful realization that their family's future will never be what they had originally envisioned, as well as the fear and denial. However, the diagnosis was hardly the most devastating surprise. They were about the quiet. Catherine said that she had been instructed to remain silent. That, for the stability of the crown, for the sake of tradition and image. Louis's truth was to stay out of the public eye. She described internal meetings in which her entreaties were dismissed, and each tear was met with a meaningless reminder of obligation. The distance between the institution and her heart grew every month. She lost a piece of herself in that void, along with her voice. She refrained from naming names. She did not place the blame. However, her message was clear. Instead, the system that had vowed to defend had repressed and marginalized. And a reckoning was due. Catherine urged the organization to prioritize kindness above formality, particularly with regard to royal children. She spoke for every young person born into a life they didn't choose, not just Louis. Youngsters who would bear the burden of expectation before they could even speak, like her son. Then came the line that made everyone stop talking. He continues to bring us joy, and I'm not going to leave him to deal with this alone. She destroyed the appearance of royal detachment with her statements. She reminded everyone that there was a mother behind the palace gates who would do anything to protect her child's honor. Catherine not only spoke to a country, but she changed it in less than 12 minutes. The answer came right away. Supporting letters filled the internet. The entire speech was replayed on news channels by pausing their programming. People attended vigils, lit candles, and publicly mourned for a youngster they had seldom seen but suddenly felt a strong connection to across the nation and beyond. There was no broadcast here. It was the tipping point. The aftershocks had only started, and there had been a break in the monarchy's well-crafted narrative. However, one room in the palace remained strangely silent while the country wept, and what happened next could have a profound impact on the monarchy's destiny. With faces pallid and futures unclear, royal advisors convened in quiet tones following Catherine's address. During his reign, King Charles had to make the most important choice. The destiny of the monarchy and its ability to endure at all would depend on what he did next. There have been candles before, but none like this one, which came from within and was carried by the very woman who was previously hailed as the crown's silent strength, rather than by adversaries or outsiders. A national reckoning had been prompted by Catherine's admission. Faith in the monarchy fell overnight. Once taken for granted, loyalty became a sharp question. Why had this reality been concealed? Why had the organization insisted that a woman standing next to her ailing child be quiet? The atmosphere within the royal walls was one of fear and brokenness. According to reports, senior courtiers suggested that King Charles make a statement. Some want to rebel. Others begged him to be humble, but Charles, scared, pulled away from the spotlight. Sources close to the palace claimed that the monarch thought about taking a brief leave of absence from his responsibilities, citing the need to evaluate his future. It demonstrated how shaken the throne had become and was an extraordinary move from a sovereign so early in his reign. William and Catherine, meantime, made their own decision. They turned down every appearance that was planned. No formal engagements, no ceremonies, no tours. It was a pause rather than a protest, an unwillingness to carry on with the performance while the world dealt with what had just been revealed. The future king and queen's absence was felt not only in the UK, but globally as well. However, their choice was greeted with understanding and support rather than criticism. Uncomfortable conversations started behind the scenes. In silence, the palace began to re-examine the standards set for royal children. No more staged interactions, no more forced appearances. Redefining the responsibilities of minors in the monarchy became a topic of discussion. Proposals that would change decades of precedent were put forth by advisors, including choices that would completely exclude children from royal responsibilities till they are adults. Parliament joined the battle outside the palace. The funding of the monarchy became a contentious issue, especially since many now believed that it was a publicly sponsored organization that had become opaque and inward-looking. There was a growing chorus of calls for greater openness in royal operations. Once exempt from this kind of examination, the monarchy was now being closely examined. But in the midst of the confusion, one thing was evident. Catherine was quite popular. What started out as adoration evolved into reverence. Both the public and newspapers referred to her as the people's queen, for her bravery, not for her titles. Every class and continent had been won over by her resolve to remain silent. Her strong stance was recognized even by longtime monarchy skeptics. The prospect of early succession became the subject of increased conjecture. Would Charles move aside? Would William rise sooner than expected, Catherine at his side as a Reformation symbol, as well as a consort? On such issues, the palace said nothing, but rumors simply got louder. The monarchy no longer functioned according to its own schedule. The public's attitude had changed. Furthermore, it wasn't awaiting authorization. One thing is certain, even though the monarchy is on the verge of collapse. A tremendous reckoning has emerged from what started off as a hushed tragedy. The crown will be shaped for future generations by the echoes of Catherine's speech. Thank you for viewing, and please remember to like and subscribe. We hope to see you in the next video.